Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Tonight, we are tracking a series of stories that, when you lay them side by side, paint a picture of a world where energy, who controls it, who profits from it, and who dies for it, is reshaping the global order in real time.
We're covering a historic shift on the Korean peninsula, where a nuclear-armed North Korea appears to be abandoning its decades-long dream of reunification. We've got deadly strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure, settler violence in the occupied West Bank, and two stories about the clean energy transition that show just how messy progress really looks.
So buckle in. This is not your 5-minute headline scroll. We're going deep tonight, because these stories deserve it, and frankly, so do you. Let's start overseas.
Our first story comes from the Korean peninsula, where something genuinely historic appears to be unfolding. According to reporting from the South China Morning Post, the North Korea that emerged from its 9th Workers' Party Congress is, and I'm not exaggerating here, a fundamentally different country from the one that came out of the 8th Congress back in 2021.
And that's a massive statement, Alex, so let's unpack it. 5 years ago, the 8th Party Congress was dominated by an aggressive weapons development program. Kim Jong-un stood before his party and laid out an ambitious nuclear and missile expansion plan, accompanied by the kind of belligerent rhetoric toward the United States that we've all become numb to over the years. The message was clear: North Korea felt vulnerable, and it was going to arm itself to the teeth.
Fast forward to today, and the tone has shifted dramatically. Kim's regime now possesses what analysts describe as an improved and resilient nuclear arsenal. They've tested intercontinental ballistic missiles, they've expanded their warhead production capabilities, and they've diversified their delivery systems. In short, they got what they wanted. The weapons program that was aspirational in 2021 is now operational.
And here's where it gets really interesting. With that nuclear deterrent firmly in hand, the North Korean leadership appears to be pivoting away from the long-standing goal of Korean reunification, a cornerstone of North Korean ideology for over 70 years, and moving toward what analysts are calling a posture of coexistence. That is a seismic ideological shift.
Think about what that means. For decades, the entire justification for the North Korean state, for the sacrifices demanded of its people, for the military-first policy, all of it was framed around the eventual reunification of the Korean peninsula under Pyongyang's leadership. Removing that from the equation changes the fundamental narrative of the regime.
The South China Morning Post analysis suggests this isn't just rhetoric. The signals coming out of the 9th Congress indicate a regime that is recalibrating its relationship with the outside world. Not opening up, let's be clear about that. But repositioning. A nuclear-armed North Korea that accepts the permanent division of the peninsula is a very different strategic actor than one that claims the South as occupied territory.
And the energy implications here are significant. North Korea has long been one of the most energy-impoverished nations on Earth. A posture of coexistence, even a limited one, could open doors to energy cooperation, pipeline projects, or at least reduce the risk of a conflict that would destabilize energy markets across East Asia. South Korea, Japan, and China are all watching this very carefully.
The question that analysts are wrestling with is whether this is genuine strategic evolution or simply a tactical pause. Kim Jong-un has surprised the world before. But the institutional signals, embedding this shift in a party congress, which is the highest decision-making body in North Korean politics, suggest this is meant to be durable. You don't rewrite your party platform on a whim.
And for the people of both Koreas, this carries enormous emotional weight. Families separated since the 1950s, the cultural ties, the shared language and history, the idea that reunification is officially off the table is profound. It's the quiet closing of a door that millions of people spent their entire lives hoping would open.
It's a story we'll be watching closely. Now, let's turn to the Middle East, where the intersection of energy and military force is as brutal and direct as it gets. Alex, what happened in Iran?
Maya, according to reporting from Middle East Eye, a joint U.S.-Israeli airstrike hit an oil depot in the city of Karaj, located in Iran's Alborz province. At least 6 people were killed. Let that sink in. A strike on civilian energy infrastructure, on an oil storage facility, killing workers and bystanders.
And we need to be precise about what's being described here. This is not a strike on a military installation that happened to be near fuel storage. This is a direct attack on an oil depot, energy infrastructure that serves the civilian population. Karaj is a major city in the Greater Tehran metropolitan area. We're talking about an urban environment, residential neighborhoods nearby, and a strike that killed 6 human beings.
The broader context is the ongoing U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran, which has escalated significantly. But targeting oil infrastructure specifically is a calculated choice. It's designed to cripple Iran's energy economy, to degrade its ability to refine and distribute fuel domestically, and to send a message that no piece of Iranian infrastructure is safe.
And let's talk about who actually suffers when you bomb an oil depot. It's not the government officials. It's not the military commanders. It's the workers at that facility, the truck drivers, the families in surrounding neighborhoods. And beyond the immediate casualties, it's every ordinary Iranian who depends on that fuel for heating, for transportation, for cooking. Destroying energy infrastructure is a form of collective punishment, and under international humanitarian law, it raises very serious questions.
The strategic logic, from the US-Israeli perspective, is about degrading Iran's economic capacity and its ability to fund proxy forces across the region. But the human cost is borne entirely by civilians. 6 people are dead. Their families are grieving tonight. And the fuel that depot stored won't be heating anyone's home this winter.
This also has global energy market implications. Every strike on Iranian oil infrastructure tightens global supply, pushes prices higher, and creates volatility that ripples through every economy on the planet. American consumers paying more at the pump, European manufacturers facing higher input costs, these aren't disconnected from a bomb falling on an oil depot in Karaj.
And the precedent being set here is deeply troubling. If energy infrastructure is now considered a legitimate military target in conflicts involving major powers, we are entering an era where oil refineries, power plants, pipelines, and fuel storage facilities around the world become targets in every future conflict. That's a terrifying prospect.
It is. And staying in the region, Alex, we have another story from the occupied West Bank that speaks to the daily human toll of this broader conflict.
Al Jazeera is reporting that Israeli settlers killed 2 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. According to the report, both victims were shot in the head by an Israeli settler. A third Palestinian died after inhaling tear gas deployed by Israeli soldiers. 3 people dead in what has become a horrifyingly routine pattern of violence.
Let's be specific about what we're describing. These are not combatants engaged in a military operation. These are civilians killed by other civilians, settlers who have illegally established communities in occupied territory under international law, while the Israeli military, rather than intervening to protect Palestinian civilians, deployed tear gas that contributed to a third death.
The settler violence crisis in the West Bank has been escalating for years, but the current period is among the worst on record. Human rights organizations, including Israeli ones like B'Tselem, have documented a systematic pattern where settlers attack Palestinian communities, destroy property, uproot olive groves, and commit acts of violence, often with the implicit or explicit protection of the Israeli military.
And the energy connection here runs deep, Alex. The occupied West Bank sits atop significant natural resources, including water aquifers and potential natural gas reserves in the eastern Mediterranean basin. Control of territory is never just about land, it's about what's under the land and who gets to exploit it. The expansion of settlements systematically dispossesses Palestinians of agricultural land, water resources, and any future claim to resource sovereignty.
The international community has been largely paralyzed on this issue. The United Nations has condemned settlement expansion repeatedly. The International Court of Justice has ruled the occupation illegal. Yet the violence continues, and the settlements continue to expand. 3 more people are dead tonight, and the structural conditions that produced their deaths remain completely unchanged.
What strikes me is the asymmetry. Armed settlers, protected by one of the most powerful militaries in the world, attacking unarmed civilians in their own communities. This isn't a conflict between equals. It's systematic dispossession backed by state power, and the victims are people whose only crime is existing on land that someone else wants.
And the tear gas detail is important. A third person died from inhaling tear gas used by Israeli soldiers. That means the military was present, it was actively engaged, and its intervention resulted in a civilian death. The military's role is supposed to be maintaining order. Instead, it's functioning as an enforcement arm of the settler enterprise.
These are the stories that don't make the front page in most Western media. 3 Palestinians killed in the West Bank is treated as background noise, as the cost of doing business. But every one of those deaths is a human being with a family, a community, a life that was cut short by violence that the international community has the power to stop and chooses not to.
Absolutely. Now, let's pivot to the energy transition, because the next 2 stories show us just how complicated the shift away from fossil fuels really is, even when the news is fundamentally positive. Maya, tell us about what's happening with home batteries.
So Electrek is reporting on a major shift in the home energy market. For over a decade, rooftop solar panels have been the centerpiece of the residential clean energy story. You put panels on your roof, you generate electricity, you sell the excess back to the grid through a system called net metering, and everybody wins. Your electricity bill drops, you reduce your carbon footprint, and the grid gets clean power. Simple, right?
It was simple. Past tense. What's changing?
Net metering rules are changing across the country, and electricity prices keep climbing. The combination is fundamentally reshaping the economics of home solar. Under traditional net metering, utilities paid you retail price for the excess electricity your panels generated. You were essentially running your meter backwards. But utilities have been lobbying aggressively to reduce those payments, and they've been winning.
California's NEM 3.0 policy was the watershed moment. It slashed the value of exported solar electricity by roughly 75%. Other states have followed with similar rollbacks. The result is that simply putting solar panels on your roof and selling excess power back to the grid is no longer the slam-dunk investment it used to be.
And this is where batteries enter the picture. Home battery systems, like the Tesla Powerwall or the GM Energy Power Bank highlighted in the Electrek reporting, allow homeowners to store the electricity their panels generate during the day and use it at night when rates are highest. Instead of selling your excess solar back to the grid at a fraction of what it's worth, you store it and use it yourself when electricity is most expensive.
So batteries are essentially becoming the new economic engine of home solar. The panels generate the power, but the battery is what makes the math work in this new regulatory environment. And the demand numbers reflect that. Battery installations are surging, even as solar-only installations plateau in some markets.
But here's the investigative angle that we need to dig into. Why are net metering rules changing? Who pushed for these changes, and who benefits? The answer is utilities. Large investor-owned utilities have lobbied state public utility commissions and state legislatures relentlessly to reduce net metering compensation. Their argument is that solar homeowners are shifting grid maintenance costs onto non-solar customers. There's a kernel of truth there, but the scale of the rollbacks goes far beyond addressing that fairness concern.
The deeper story is about control. Distributed solar, millions of homes generating their own electricity, represents an existential threat to the traditional utility business model. Every kilowatt-hour you generate on your roof is a kilowatt-hour you don't buy from the utility. Net metering rollbacks are, at their core, an attempt by incumbent energy companies to slow down a technology that threatens their revenue.
And the irony is thick. These same utilities are now positioning themselves to sell home battery systems, or to integrate customer batteries into their own grid management strategies. They fought distributed solar for a decade, successfully degraded the economics through regulatory capture, and are now looking to profit from the batteries that homeowners need as a result. It's a masterclass in corporate strategy disguised as energy policy.
The good news is that even with these headwinds, the combination of solar plus storage is still economically attractive for many homeowners, especially as electricity prices continue to rise. The Department of Energy has reported average residential electricity price increases of over 20% in some regions over the past 3 years. When your utility bill is climbing that fast, generating and storing your own power becomes very compelling regardless of what net metering pays.
And the technology keeps getting better and cheaper. Battery costs have fallen dramatically, energy density is improving, and new chemistries like lithium iron phosphate are making home batteries safer and longer lasting. The market is adapting faster than the utilities anticipated, which is why you're seeing this pivot in the home energy conversation from solar alone to solar plus storage as an integrated system.
The lesson here is that the clean energy transition is not a smooth, linear process. It's a fight, with incumbents using every regulatory and political tool at their disposal to protect their market position. Progress happens anyway, but it happens in spite of enormous resistance, and consumers bear the cost of that friction.
Exactly right. And speaking of the clean energy transition encountering real-world complexity, our final story tonight takes us to the waters off New York, where an enormous offshore wind project is taking shape, with a twist that tells you everything about the state of American industrial policy.
CleanTechnica is reporting on the Empire Wind Project, an 810-megawatt offshore wind farm being constructed off the coast of New York. When complete, this will be one of the largest offshore wind installations in the United States, capable of powering hundreds of thousands of homes with clean electricity. On its face, this is great news for the energy transition.
It is great news. But here's the detail that caught our attention. The vessel that will install the turbines, the massive, specialized ship that lifts and positions those enormous wind turbine components, was built in Singapore. Not in an American shipyard. Not by American workers. A next-generation offshore wind installation vessel, constructed halfway around the world, is being brought in to build American energy infrastructure.
And this gets to a fundamental tension in American energy and industrial policy. The United States has committed billions of dollars to offshore wind development through the Inflation Reduction Act, through state-level renewable energy mandates, and through federal leasing of offshore areas. But the country lacks the specialized shipbuilding capacity to actually construct these projects with domestically built vessels.
The Jones Act, which requires that vessels transporting goods between U.S. ports be American-built, American-owned, and American-crewed, has been a major factor here. It's created a situation where the U.S. has massive demand for offshore wind installation vessels but almost no domestic capacity to build them. The workaround involves complex logistics where foreign-built vessels operate from foreign ports or use feeder barges to comply with the law's technical requirements.
So we have a country that's spending tens of billions on clean energy, that desperately needs to build offshore wind to meet its climate commitments, and that can't build the ships required to do the job. Meanwhile, Singapore, South Korea, and European countries have invested in exactly this kind of advanced maritime manufacturing. The result is that American clean energy jobs, the shipbuilding jobs, the advanced manufacturing jobs, are going overseas.
And this isn't because American workers can't do this work. It's because decades of underinvestment in shipbuilding infrastructure, combined with policy decisions that prioritized other sectors, left the United States without the industrial base needed for this specific capability. The Empire Wind project is moving forward, which is good, but it's moving forward with a Singapore-built vessel, which should prompt some uncomfortable questions about American industrial readiness.
The 810 megawatt capacity of Empire Wind is significant. To put that in perspective, that's enough to power roughly 300,000 homes. The project represents a major step forward for offshore wind on the U.S. East Coast, and construction is actively underway. But the supply chain story behind it reveals just how much work remains to build a truly domestic clean energy manufacturing sector.
The Biden-era investments through the IRA were supposed to catalyze domestic manufacturing. And to be fair, they have spurred significant investment in areas like battery production and solar panel manufacturing. But offshore wind vessels are extraordinarily complex, extraordinarily expensive, and take years to build. The pipeline wasn't there when these projects were being planned, and it still isn't fully there today.
And there's a geopolitical dimension to this. Energy independence is a phrase that gets thrown around constantly in American politics. But if your clean energy infrastructure depends on vessels built in Asia and turbines manufactured in Europe, how independent are you really? The shift from fossil fuel dependence to clean energy dependence on foreign supply chains is a trade-off that policymakers need to grapple with honestly.
The optimistic take is that projects like Empire Wind are creating the demand signal that will eventually pull domestic manufacturing capacity into existence. You build the projects with whatever vessels are available now, you create the market, and American shipyards tool up to meet future demand. That's the theory. Whether it plays out that way depends entirely on sustained policy commitment, which in the current political environment is anything but guaranteed.
Alright, Maya, we've covered a lot of ground tonight. Let's pull back and look at the bigger picture. What connects a North Korean party Congress, a bombed oil depot in Iran, settler violence in the West Bank, home battery economics, and a Singapore-built ship off the coast of New York?
Energy. Every single one of these stories, at its core, is about who controls energy, who profits from energy, and who suffers for energy. North Korea's nuclear pivot is fundamentally about the energy of the atom, weapons grade, but energy nonetheless, and how possessing it changes your strategic calculus. The strike on the Iranian oil depot is about destroying an adversary's energy capacity, regardless of civilian cost. The settler violence in the West Bank is connected to resource control and territorial dominance over land that holds energy and water resources.
And the domestic stories mirror the same dynamics at a different scale. Net metering rollbacks are about utilities fighting to maintain their monopoly over energy distribution, even as technology empowers individual homeowners to generate their own power. The Empire Wind story is about whether America can build its own clean energy future or whether it will depend on foreign industrial capacity to get there.
The pattern is control. In every one of these stories, powerful actors, states, militaries, corporations, are maneuvering to control energy resources, energy infrastructure, and energy markets. And in every one of these stories, ordinary people are bearing the costs. Iranian workers killed at an oil depot. Palestinians killed by settlers on resource-rich land. American homeowners navigating regulatory changes designed to protect utility profits.
And that's the story of our time, isn't it? The 21st century is the century of energy transition, and that transition is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening in a world of competing powers, entrenched interests, and profound inequality. The decisions being made right now, in Pyongyang, in Tel Aviv, in Washington, in State Utility Commission hearing rooms, will determine what the energy landscape looks like for generations.
What frustrates me is the gap between what's possible and what's actually happening. The technology for a clean, distributed, democratized energy system exists right now. Solar panels, batteries, wind turbines, these are mature, cost-effective technologies. The barriers aren't technological. They're political. They're about who gets to profit, who gets to control, and who gets left behind.
And that's exactly why journalism like this matters. When these stories are covered in isolation, a strike here, a policy change there, a ship contract somewhere else, the pattern is invisible. It's only when you lay them side by side that you see the through line. Energy is power, in every sense of the word, and the fight over who wields that power is the defining struggle of our era.
So to our viewers, we ask you this: pay attention to the energy stories. Not just the headline about gas prices or the latest solar panel deal. Pay attention to who's making the decisions, who's writing the regulations, who's launching the strikes, and who's building the ships. Follow the energy, and you'll find the truth.
That's our show for tonight. Every story we covered came from verified reporting: South China Morning Post, Middle East Eye, Al Jazeera, Electrek, and CleanTechnica. We encourage you to read the original sources, dig deeper, and form your own conclusions.
Because the truth doesn't come prepackaged. It takes work. It takes skepticism. And it takes people who refuse to look away.
I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity.
This has been Truth Report. Stay informed, stay critical, and we'll see you next time.